Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to week 6. This is the Reddit League show with me, Zotomo. Today, I'm joined, as always, by Calamity. How are you?
Hello. Doing good.
And our special guest this week is Mthebassman from Division 3. How are you doing?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm doing good.
Great. Yeah, so because we have quite a bit to talk about this week, let's just jump right into it and see how our competitors did in our second world map. So let's take a look at Division 1. Some pretty tight results as always, Calamity.
Yeah, it said last week that this week's matches would be crucial for the relegation battle, and Verdok and Compilu delivered. Despite how close all of these games were, none of them really ended up with a surprising result, I think. Just last week, Division 1 set the new record for the highest average, and it's instantly been bettered with 24,575 points, which is just insane for 3 minutes. The only thing that's still missing, interestingly enough, is throughout all divisions, a perfect score. There's been 4 players so far who got a perfect score in the different division seed, which were me, Mr. Blue, Chicago, and Radu, who did it 3 times, because of course he did. But no one's done it in their own division yet.
Very interesting indeed. Yeah, so Mthebassman finally wins for our bottom 2 competitors in Comte Blue and Verdok, but still not a whole lot else. It's going to be surprising.
Yeah, the results are all very tight. I didn't expect all the players to score as well, and even the number 9 and 10 of the league both challenging themselves to try to get out of that relegation zone. It's making this competition quite tight overall, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely indeed. So let's see if those wins for Comte Blue and Verdok means anything significant for the table. But Calamity, it really doesn't, unfortunately for them.
You can see the consequences of no real upsets except those 2 here. Schludi dropped down 2 positions behind Simi and GC, but everyone else stayed exactly where they were last week. Of course, Verdok and Compilu got a lot closer. The problem for them is that there's only one more world map to play. We can thank the match draw, though, because it gave us the hilarious situation that their opponents in week 9 will yet again be Chicago and Kevin Kroner. With 3 games to go, technically everyone except Compilu can still come in first place as well. I didn't think it was possible for Verdok until I had an in-depth look at it, and he would require a miracle and at least 13 of the last 15 matches to go his way. Pretty much no bonus points and a huge swing in score differential, but it is possible. That being said, coming first doesn't really matter all that much anyway. Everything can still make it to the championship playoffs and win the league that way.
Indeed, yeah. So anything interesting for you here, Mthebassman, in Division 1?
Yeah, well, overall, I think that this division has been the tightest of them all. It's been so competitive. Like at the start, 3 players, GC, Schludi, and Equinox, I think, all had 9 points, and the rest had 5 or less. So it was kind of looking like a 3-team race. But yeah, then they dropped some points, and it just opened up a lot. Simi had a rough start, but is getting back up there as well, as I kind of expected. I'm not really sure who to pick here as placing in top 4 because it's all so tight.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and our 2 newly promoted players in Division 1 in Equinox and Chicago are in the middle of the pack. Chicago hanging in there just on the edge of that relegation spot, but they're not being blown away. And while the newcomers in Comte Blue, Schulde, and Kevin Kroner are also overall putting up decent numbers, at least with hanging in with those Division 1 big guns for sure. But yeah, as Calamity mentioned, and it's pretty close at the top, and you've just got to get into those top 4 places in order to make that playoff run with a shot at the title. So even somebody like Verdok will be looking just to sneak in at that 4th position and give himself a chance at least in those playoffs. Well, let's take a look at next week in Lesotho to see if maybe Verdok can do it in that week. Calamity, any matchups here that you're looking forward to?
Certainly. At the end of this week, we'll probably be at the point where we finally got clarity that at least some people won't be able to make it into the playoffs anymore. We'll have to see who those people are. It's hard to look past Raidman Mucha and Simi to win their games, and I'll also say Magyaron is heavily favored against Kevin Kroner just based on his performances in the other national maps so far. The two interesting matches for me this week are Verdok versus GC and CG versus Equinox. Verdok's put in good scores in North Macedonia and Kyrgyzstan, even though he lost both games, and GC has been far from convincing on the national maps. With Verdok having to play Simi next week as well, he needs this win if he wants to have any chance for a repetition of his top 4 spot last season. And for the other match, Equinox has been getting good performances on the smaller maps, even more so than on the world maps, which is interesting. He's one of the few players who definitely massively, stumbling over my words here. I can't think of it. Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. CG has fluctuated quite a lot on the smaller maps. He's had a very poor performance in North Macedonia. He's been average in Brazil, and then he's been great in Kyrgyzstan and Pennsylvania. We'll see which CG we get this time.
Yeah, yes, indeed. It could definitely throw things into the balance if he manages to pull off a win or not. And that, Mthebassman, anything here that piques your interest?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to 2 matches specifically, actually. First one being Magyaron versus Kevin Kroner, because if one of those win, they could maybe secure getting out of that relegation zone. And yeah, Simi Schludi both being good contenders to reach top 4, so that could throw things off a bit.
Indeed. Yeah, quite getting a bit tight at the top in the middle of the pack, so everybody's still in contention there. But we've only got a few weeks left, so we'll see how that all plays out towards the end. But should be an interesting run for those playoff spots, to say the least. So let's take a look at Division 2 in their world matchup. Mthebassman, finally a win for our friend Radox. He has been waiting all season for this. Took him 6 weeks, but he finally got a win.
Yeah, it's been I was quite surprised to see him not have any wins so far, because I always thought he was quite a decent player. So yeah, I hope that gives him a bit of confidence and gives him some momentum to maybe still save himself, but it's going to be very tough considering the opposition in the rest of the division.
Indeed, yeah. So Clement, anything here in particular for you?
Yeah, after missing the deadline last week, Teskatak lost his first game for real this week. Other than that, good performances from the people we expect them from. What I found most interesting, though, was that from the bottom 7 scorers, not a single one managed to get within 10 kilometers on more than 2 rounds, which is really rare for a world map. And even more interesting about that is that it wasn't because there was 2 easy and 3 hard rounds or anything. Everyone's problems came from different rounds. Round 1 had 1 person out of those 7 within 10 kilometers. Round 2 had 5. Round 3 had 2. Round 4 had 1. And round 5 had 3.
Interesting. Yeah, so just maybe more time practicing on some of the smaller maps to come, rather than kind of getting a bit of a refresher course on world maps, perhaps, for them. But interesting indeed. And let's see what that means for our league table here in Division 2. L49 does move up into second place with his performance. His practice is really paying off for him in the last few weeks, as he's been slowly climbing the table. And yeah, after the yellow card last week, Teskotak losing his first match drops him a few places down to 4th. Probably the biggest movement at the bottom of the table is Blockchain Prenup, who finally gets himself out of the relegation zone with an 8th place position. And Radox, despite winning his first game, is still at the bottom of the table. Yeah. So especially, we're only about halfway through now the season for Division 2, given that there are 12 players. So at the midway point, How do things seem to be shaping up to you, Mthebassman?
Yeah, like I said, I really didn't expect Radux to be so low, so I hope for him he can still pick himself back up. Yeah, otherwise I've been very pleasantly surprised, or maybe not surprised, but more so impressed with the numbers both Mr. Blue and Talent Ball have been putting up. I remember in the preseason, Mr. Blue forgot to make a pin in one of the rounds, which basically cost him qualification for the first division. So um, I can imagine he's very eager to get in that first division, and he's doing a very good job himself. And like you said, Talent Bala, he's done uh, all of the seeds every round and always put up a very decent score. So yeah, honestly, I'd pick these two to promote directly.
Okay, yeah, interesting. We'll see how that plays out in the second half. Yeah, definitely. Even though we're halfway through the season, that means there's still plenty to play for those people in the relegation zones. It's not time to give up quite yet, hopefully. Calamity, anything from you here?
Yeah, I think you both have summarized it quite well, and I don't have much to add. Just the bottom half of the table moved a lot closer together in recent weeks. So yeah, there's nothing over for any of those competitors, and they can still all save themselves.
Oh, so definitely be looking for a very interesting second half of the season for Division 2. Let's see who our players will be facing up against in Division 2 in Week 7. For here, so Mthebassman, any matches that stand out to you?
Well, I think very obviously Mr. Blue, Tall Impala is the match to look out for, number one versus number two. That one stands out to me the most. I'm also quite interested how Radux will do now that he got a win finally, because Yellow Skarmory has been not the most consistent, so I'm quite surprised to see how that result will be as well. Yeah, otherwise, pretty decent matchups overall, I'd say.
Okay, Calamity.
Yeah, we get our top of the table clash this week. It'll be a very important match for the both of them. If Mr. Blue manages to win, he'll have a 5-point gap to third place, which I honestly can't see him losing in the last 5 weeks. And if Tall Impala wins, the top will move a lot closer together, and we might even get the top 5 within 2 points if all the favorites win their games. That being said, I think Lesotho is a map that lends itself to upsets, and if we ignore the top 2, we've got 3rd to 7th facing 8th to 12th this week, so there's certainly room for some. The problem is, going by performances in North Macedonia and Kyrgyzstan, I don't really see any upset happening. Radux against Skarmory seems the most likely, but more so because they've both struggled equally on those maps.
Yeah. And after 2 odd weeks of performances that see him losing first position, Teskotak is up against 10th position Seppo. So that's probably a week he'll fancy himself to get back on track and climb maybe another position back up over Radu. But could be tough with Radu facing off against Blockchain, quite low in the table there. He should be able to pull that one out. Indeed. So let's take a look at the results from Division 3 from Week 6 on A Balanced World. Calamity, besides Redact getting a bye week, anything of interest here?
Yeah, similarly to Division 1, Division 3 have also blown their highest average score so far out of the water with 24,333 points. And with such fine margins, we got to see a couple of upsets this week. I hyped up Guelo Wizard versus Hugalvara last week, and it certainly delivered, with Hugalvara getting close to a perfect score and being the first to take points off Guelo Wizard. What I didn't expect was Porkstakes to pull through and get an almost perfect score himself, beating Wolf Tracker. The rest went as predicted, although I'd really enjoyed if I could actually get a satisfying win once in a while. The only game so far where I was happy with my performance and didn't make any unnecessary mistakes was Week 3 in a Real World, where I lost.
Yeah. How about your matchup there in the basement against Wakelock?
Yeah, first of all, don't worry, Calamity. All my wins have been very tight. But yeah, it was a very easy seed. The first 3 rounds were pretty easy to 5K. I think the 4th round was Ghana, where almost everybody struggled. Yeah, I thought I'd have a pretty decent score, but I actually had one of the lowest. But yeah, so I'm still happy with the win. I think it's an essential win as well because of a pretty tough uh, set of matches coming up with facing Freckles this week. After that, Wolf Tracker and Calamity after that. So if I want to, keep myself relevant for the top four, I need to get at least some points out of that. So yeah, very happy with the win there, but hope I can do better and be more consistent overall.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can do that. Let's see what these results mean for the Division 3 table with Guelo Wizard and Wolf Trekker picking up their first losses of the season. I think Wolf Trekker did lose some points, but then the Ijubag game got removed from his standing, so that kind of reset himself back to a perfect win-loss ratio. But then with this week, he's back down to 1 loss as well. Big movements from Dem Freckles and Reddit moving out of the automatic and relegation battle, respectively, into 6th and
you meant
9th
pork steaks
place
instead of Reddit.
Oh, I did mean pork steak. Sorry about that. Those two moved up out of the table. I wrote the wrong name down. Of course I did. Anyways, besides that, not a whole lot of movement at the top, despite the losses for Guelo Wizard and Wolf Trekker. They still keep their 1st and 2nd places. But Mthebassman, you can see you there in 3rd position. And very nice. And Calamity still, you're still hanging in there, trying to get a playoff spot, despite your very nice performances week to week.
Yeah, there's been no movement whatsoever in the top 5 this week. Although Guelo Wizard losing was very important to not have him run away with the division. He's also got his free week this time in Lesotho, so we can go into the last 5 weeks on a level playing field with everyone having their games against Ijubek already behind them. Behind that, things are very close, as you said. Freckles and Porksteaks catapulting themselves up the table with their wins. And yeah, Mthebassman is in a bit of a bad spot, having a game more than most of his direct competitors for relegation and still being 3 points behind the next closest opponent to him.
Yeah. Mthebassman, anything in particular stand out to you here and after 6 weeks?
Yeah, Pork Steak seems to have picked up the pace a little bit, was dead last for a bit, but then had 2 very good rounds, so he's suddenly in it again. And I think Guelo Wizard and Wolf Trekker both losing their games opened up the table a bit, as it was getting a bit like a 2-man race at one point. So for the competition, it's quite it's very decent to have. I think Calamity got the most unlucky because he put up some very good scores, but his win against Ijubek didn't count. So it's but he still has a very good chance to get in top 4. It will be pretty interesting either way, I think.
Indeed. Yeah, you said that your wins have been very tight so far, Bassman, and that certainly shows in that score differential. You're sitting 3rd in the table, but your score differential is way lower than anybody else around you, only 5,859 points over your competitors in total. Well, everybody else around you is over 10K at least.
Yeah, so, it was quite circumstantial because, for example, North Macedonia, I barely beat Pork Steaks. He also had over 20K. I didn't have a good score in Brazil, and the wins just went a bit in my favor. My opponents all had pretty high scores as well, so I didn't get a lot of opportunities to really get a good score differential. So maybe in the end that could bite me, but so I just have to depend on getting more points, and because I cannot win in tiebreakers as it looks like right now.
Yeah. So keep racking up those wins to make sure you maintain your playoff position here. Let's see who they'll be facing off in week 7 on Lesotho. Yeah, so Calamity.
Yeah, I hope Pork Steaks doesn't continue his great run so far. I mean, at the end, you always just got to get more points than the others. But yeah, that would come at a bad time for me. I can't really afford many more losses. I think I can afford 1 more throughout the remainder of the season if I still want to have a shot at top 2. And I play like 1st, 3rd and 4th in the last 3 weeks, so that's also not that great for me. In theory, this should be a straightforward week. None of the top 5 play each other, but there's always room for some upsets, especially when you've got countries like Lesotho. But again, just like in Division 4, I don't really know where the upsets are supposed to come from. Freckles as well is, as we've seen so far in the 1.5 seasons we've played, way more comfortable on world maps and hasn't really put up much high scores on national maps. Again, Wakelog not really put in great performances on the national map. Same goes for Fios. So yeah, I don't really see any upset happening here.
Do you think being from South Africa would give Theos any advantage, being that Lesotho, while not South Africa, is a neighboring country?
Yeah, it depends, I think, because just because you're in a neighboring country doesn't necessarily mean that you have much experience of that. But yeah, I think he said he lives in Durban, which I think is not that far away from Lesotho. So maybe if he's had a couple of holidays there, who knows? It might give him a bit of an advantage.
It's certainly interesting to see. I think definitely the most interesting thing is first place Glacial Wizard does have his bye week coming up, so he probably is pretty happy about that. Doesn't have to play or spend any time practicing a map like Lesotho. So he maybe won't move in the table depending on how the Wolf Trekker and Theos game goes, but he should pick up an automatic. His points won't change anyway, so we'll see if Wolf Trekker takes over position 1 simply on the game difference or not. But Mthebassman, anything for you?
Yeah, yeah, Glacial Wizard locked out quite a bit with Lesotho, but on the other hand, we could see a 3-way tie if me and Wolf Trekker both win our games, which would lose his lead. So in that aspect, it might not be the best for him. But yeah, otherwise, quite interested to see if Porksticks can keep up his form or if Calamity will still pick up some good scores and still win his games. And yeah, I think my game with Freckles could be tight. I'm not sure how he will be performing in a country like this, but considering it's Lesotho, I think nobody can.
Yeah, definitely a kind of a bit of a mystery country, map where you can definitely practice and learn a lot, but still there's not a whole lot of information. So it could come down to just spawn locations and a bit of luck in the end. So let's take a look at Division 4A and how those matches played out in Week 6. Mthebassman, how did things seem to be shaping up in the penultimate week for Division 4?
The results in this division are not too surprising, I'd say. Both having a very, very high score that which does and doesn't surprise me because Mabose is definitely, in my opinion, one of the better players of the 4th division. Patriots, I think, secured promotion with that win, even though it's not the highest score. So good on him. And it's still a pretty competitive division, I'd say.
Indeed. Calamity.
Yeah, Patriots got a bit lucky that he had to face Lenovo Sucks in the 1 week. He put up a bit of a weaker score. Neusel will kick himself for his bad performance because he could have pretty much secured himself his playoff spot already, but his bad performance means he's going to have to win this week. But yeah, he's still got everything in his own hands, so it's not that much of an issue for him, I think.
Indeed. Yeah, I was quite unlucky to go up against Mobos in this round when he pretty much put up maybe one of the best scores across any of the divisions in terms of the total number of points. So I would really rather have faced almost anybody else but him. But this week was definitely a week of aces. If anybody takes a look at the Division 4 seed, almost every round had at least 2 or 3 people ace it. Probably the most tricky round was round 1. It had a little bit of a kind of a red herring in terms of some road signs in Thailand, but other than that, pretty much aces across the board. I think a lot of players got, or doubled their ace count across the whole season in 1 week in Division 4. So very, very competitive there for quite a few of us. But despite that, the table didn't change at all in the basement.
Yeah, Patriots has promoted despite not having good scores, so good on him. Yeah, but still a lot can happen in the bottom. Well, Lenovo Sucks is eliminated, I think, but Anons could even still promote if he gets a win and all the results go his way. So, yeah, but as expected, the players I expected to be in the top are in top. Max, Babos, and Patriots all putting up good scores in both their own seeds and the other division seeds. So yeah, overall, I'm quite interested to see what their placement will be in the end because, yeah, I can see a lot of interesting things happen depending on if Max, for example, can get in second. Yeah.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, Anand Zed, unfortunately, he's not in it anymore because Zotomo and Noisel play each other, so either of them will definitely get above 9 points. So he can't make up that disadvantage anymore. Other than that, yeah, most of the table is at least clear on who's gonna fill what role, so to speak. Pedro's promoted, Mabos and Max will go into the playoffs. NNZ and Lenovo Sucks will be out of it. And then you've got Zotomo versus Noisel, which will be the important match for next week. And you'd think that would be it, but Nitnarok can also still fail to make the playoffs if you, Zotomo, lose against Noisel but get in the top 4 scores, and Nitnarok loses his game against Patriots by more than 573 points than you against Noisel. The 2 playoff spots go to the 2 of you, with Nitnarok being left empty-handed.
Yeah, no matter what sport it is, playoff races always come down to very interesting math. Who can beat who by how much, and so on. That really can move everything around, especially in something that's it's only 2 points separating that 4th to 6th position. So all of us are definitely in the hunt there, depending on how things go. But definitely, it's in kind of mine and Noisel's hands because we do face each other. All I have to say is that I really thank Schmingo for adding this bonus point rule, because I have earned not a majority, but a big chunk of points off of that bonus point, because I've got 4 losses, but I have pretty consistently put up the best or one of the best losing scores of the week. So that has kept me right there in that 5th position, despite having a few losses. So I'm pretty happy with that rule change. So yeah, let's take a little bit of a closer look at those matchups we have already been talking about in Lesotho. It is me against Noisel is probably the match of the week at 5th and 6th position. But again, as Calamity said, Max, FI, and Mabos definitely can make things interesting depending on how much either one of them wins by. Anna and Z and Lenovo Sucks pretty much playing for kind of that not last position down there. But Nitnarok also against a very tough matchup against Patriots. But anything from you here, Mthebassman?
Yeah, I think the top 2 games are going to be very important because for the ones who don't know, the second placed in Division 4A will face 5th of Division 4B, and 3rd will face 4th of the other division. So being second is still going to be very important because you could potentially have a lesser opponent in the playoffs. So I think Max is very eager to overtake Mabos there, and yeah, Zotomo and Noisel, yeah, they can both still clinch a playoff spot, but it has to all go the right way. So it's very interesting to see how that will pan out.
Indeed. Calamity.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much said everything important there. It'll be one last week for all of the competitors to get in there, practice Lesotho, and make sure they keep or get whatever position they want from that last week's game.
Indeed. So let's take a look at that second half of Division 4, the Division 4B, how their matchups played out and what that might mean for that playoff race. Calamity.
Yeah, a bit of weakness from closed at the worst possible time, and the great performance from that one-wheeled girl makes for one hell of an interesting last week. Papagato missed his chance to secure himself a place in the playoffs, and he'll now have to upset one of the big three in Deep Thought to make his way there.
Yeah, indeed. Caroline putting up quite the score on a world map. I think the Division 4 players definitely seem to be stronger on world maps than country maps. So maybe not a complete surprise, but definitely a surprise that Close didn't put up at least 23,000, a bit from him. Bassman, anything from you here on this matchups?
Yeah, I do agree that Caroline beating Closed is quite an upset and could potentially cost him because I've been quite impressed by the numbers Ed has been putting up, so yeah, that could maybe actually cost him direct promotion. So I mean, still not over, but yeah, that could maybe be some very expensive points dropping for him.
Indeed. So let's take a look at the Division 4B table. They actually moved as compared to Division 4A. Ed moves up into first with H-Town making a huge jump from 7th to 4th there with his win. That one-wheeled girl, though, making it very, very close at the bottom. I think this division is way closer in terms of who can make those playoff spots than Division 4A, especially with that win from her. So Calamity.
Yeah, Division 4B has been blown wide open by that upset. And Ed Boris goes into week 7 as the favorite. But yeah, as we saw last week, anything can happen. And even with a win, Closed can technically still overtake him on score difference. Behind that, H-Town has, bar any upsets in week 7, virtually guaranteed himself a spot in the playoff. With the other one most likely going to the only game that doesn't include one of the top 3, that one weird girl against GRH77.
Yeah. Mthebassman, anything stand out to you here that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, obviously the top 3 is pretty secured, but I'm quite surprised how tight it is down there that literally everyone can still make the playoffs. So, yeah, everyone down there is going to make sure they put up a good performance. But yeah, it will be very interesting to see who will make it in the end.
Yeah, it's very tight at that top with the score differential. Only 3 players have a positive score differential, and their positive score differential is quite large, over 27,000 for all of them. Ed over 35,000. Everybody else in the minus, so it really shows that those 3 are pretty secure in their place. But let's look at the final week for them in Lesotho. So Calamity.
Yeah, the funny thing is here, as I've mentioned a bit before, that the matchup between 8th and 6th in Caroline and GRH77 is probably going to decide who comes 5th. Because, well, unless we get an upset from Papagato, H-Town, or Steven, those 3 won't be getting any points this week. Yeah, other than that, pretty straightforward. It might depend a bit, as I've said before, on the score difference between Closed and Ed Boris, but with, I think it was 7,000 or 8,000 points, the difference between the two, it'll have to take mostly a really bad performance from Steven if Closed wants to have any chance that way.
Okay. Mthebassman.
Well, considering the map is Lesotho, this is like the ideal map for upsets to happen. So I think I might maybe disagree a bit with Calamity because it unless the top players have studied the countries thoroughly, we could maybe see some very low scores from plays you might not expect it from, depending on how much practice they've been putting into it. So,
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Definitely very interesting for the final week in Division 4 all around, A and B. And we'll take a more in-depth look next week at once we actually know the results of this week and that playoff battle that will be starting after a bye week for everybody. Gets a bit of a week off. for Division 4. But real quick, before we finish, let's take a little look at the map in more detail. The map, again, as we've been mentioning all evening, is Lesotho, created by Topotic with an average score of only 7,986. I think Calamity maybe can correct me. This might be the lowest average score of any map we've played.
I can correct you on something else. That's not the Lesotho map we're
It's
playing.
not the Lesotho map.
But
Okay.
it doesn't matter. We're going to be playing the Lesotho map of Asinsekov 2 because
you
it's
picked the other
got
one. Okay.
it's got a lot more locations. As you can see, Topotic's map only has 250 locations, while Asinsekov's has over 10,000, I think. But yeah, probably the average score and the rest of it is quite similar.
Yeah, but either way, a very interesting country to be playing in. Exactly. So sorry about that. I'll get that fixed in post. Yeah, but Clement, anything you're looking forward to or anything interesting about Lesotho in terms of a map?
Yeah, if I were to compare Lesotho to any of the maps we've played so far this season, I would compare it to North Macedonia mostly. Like a lot of moving around to find signs pointing towards cities or landmarks. A landscape that's not very distinct and relatively limited coverage. Unlike in Brazil, Kyrgyzstan or Pennsylvania, area codes will also not help our competitors this week, and neither will most of the signs. I'd say the most useful thing is probably to familiarize yourself with the town names that do show up on the map, so that if you do find a sign that mentions one, you know whether to look for it on the map or not.
Indeed, yeah, it is a very small country with very limited Google Street View coverage, which could definitely come into play in terms of knowing the cities and locations that you might find. Yeah, so that'll do it for us this week. We'll see you all next week for a very interesting finish to Division 4. But as the rest of the divisions continue on their way, getting ready towards their playoff runs in a few weeks. So thank you for joining me, Mthebassman and Calamity, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.
Bye.
See ya.